Okay, so what happened yesterday? We had a storm that was coming to the area. Now, we haven't had a bad storm this year, which I'm really thankful for because I do not like bad storms at all. It's really annoying when that happens because then you're just sitting there the entire day waiting for the power to fail out here, which will happen. Well, yesterday, like this whole week actually has been a kind of a technical thing. I lost internet on Monday, didn't get it back till Wednesday. No, Sunday night, didn't get it back till, middle of Tuesday, I think. And then, like yesterday, it's raining. There's some thunderstorms, but it's not nothing really severe. Like, the wind wasn't blowing anything like that. Nothing like that. In fact, several times I turned back and, as some of you ask questions, how's this going, how's that going, stuff like that. And every single time I looked out the window, no wind. Rain is not really heavy for where I live, but it's there. And then when I was recording yesterday, all of a sudden, like the power flickered out and then came right back up. The only problem was, it had stayed down far enough to where it had turned off the computer. And the computer came back up. I started, I was like, okay, power flickered, whatever. Get back in, stuff like that. There has been times where I've lost connection to the stream, and then if I get back fast enough, I can get the thing rebooted and get everything back in order. That didn't happen yesterday. I got back to the streaming screen. I sat there, started to set something else up, and the power went down again. And then it happened 4 more times like that, where I was sitting here trying to get things back, where I was sitting there trying to get things back up, and then all of a sudden, right when, like, it would always be when I got Discord to load and stuff like that, like clockwork. It would come up, and then something would happen, it would go down. And eventually, the last time it went down, the last couple of times it went down, I heard a humming from the outside transformer, and I was wondering if the transformer was going to blow. And my screen, I have a second screen right here, that's off to the side, and that thing was displaying colors that, you should only see on an acid trip. So I unplugged that, and I just decided, okay, I've been trying for 20 minutes to get back, like 20, 30 minutes to get back. Power keeps on going down. Things keep on happening with I'm hearing humming from outside. I'm hearing humming from the transformers outside. I'm going to unplug everything because this is power. These are power spikes, and I might mess up my equipment. So I unplugged my computer here. I unplugged my work computer, which I need to plug that stuff back up. And I just said, okay, that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen today. And, it is what it is. It sucked. I'm sorry. Not really much I can do about it. But, the only thing we can do is finish stealth mission Infiltration. And the only thing I can do right now is see who's in the chat. So, let's go. We have the refurbished tech priest, Defies. We have Ronnie. We have Diclonius. We have Captain Tybalt of the Blood Angels. I think, looking at Captain Tybalt, I seriously think he stole the silent H in his name. Master of Context is here. We have Ripoff Productions, LLC, Inception Gamer, Elise Binge. We got Aquila. We got Mr. Reich. We got, Nick Tran, Dark Innovator. Yes, it's nice to see you too, bud. We have Alec. We got the Lone Guardsmen, Julian. We have no one. We have Eternal and Obsidian Black and Wolf. Attention, Sigismund. Multiple third parties ever bud. Yes. Seriously, though, I think Captain Tobalt down there, the Blood Angel, stole a consonant. Oh, man. So, okay. So we're going to finish Stealth Mission. I'm an idiot. Thank you, Slacker. I request a channel in Discord for clipping vids. All right, hold on a second. 1 second. Let's see. before I even start, let's see. Main Vux, nah. Let's see. Barracks, no. Should be. I'm gonna put it under headquarters. And the headquarters name. Now I'll have to do this. Julian, what are you talking about at the same time on the power station, Blue? Cannon Nos of the Digital Warp. Stay thirsty, my friends. What were we calling this? What are we calling this? Let's see. Thank you, Defies. Defies says he's working on my Stellaris playlist for making my life pain and suffering, but Paradox happened again, and things being much more reworked than expect. Again, are they about to release another? Are they about to release another? Are they about to release another? I'm an idiot. An expansion. Yes, I know. I do need to relearn High Gothic. Excuse me. I don't point out your flaws. Do you have flaws? I have flaws. Let's see. Let's see. Thank you, Defies. I'm trying to come up with a name for this clips. I'm just gonna name it. You know what? I will make this when I will do this soon. A rework of DLC inbound? No kidding. Show us the pugs. The pugs are I would go show you the pugs, but the pugs are right now eating. And if I pull them away while they're eating, they get rather uptight. And the thing about it, and right now with Volcana, she is getting to the point where she is just like, get these things away from me. So stop doing that to me, no one. She's like, get these things away from me. She doesn't want them anywhere around her. Me and the Trident got a chance to take a look at Halo Nightfall, and Ascension is being why? Ships are being reworked. More things are being rebuilt. Multiple of the biggest mods are exploding on Tuesday. You know, I love Bannerlord. I love playing Bannerlord. It's like my number one game for when I'm hating League or something like that. But the biggest problem with them is every single time they update, all my mods just disappear. All my mods just cease working. And it's a pain. I go through Vortex through Nexus mods, but it just causes a problem. By the way, you didn't mention the dad. Did he go to get the milk? No, the dad's sitting in there with a hospitaler right now. He's being a good boy. And here's something else. These puppies are going when these puppies get ready to move on, and we get ready to home them, and their snoots are growing in. It's adorable. There's the Burp of Judge. Well, we're going to have our second female might be having puppies around that time too, when they're getting ready to go home. So it's going to be literally boom to boom, and we just looked. We looked at her when she went into her heat cycle, and we just looked at her because we had just finished the third day of taking care of the puppies, of the newborns, and then the other one goes into heat, and we're just sitting there looking at her like, really? This is the time you chose to do this? Are you serious? Captain Tybalt asks, hey boss, I asked this a while back, but if an Astartes is asked to join the Death Watch, can he decline the offer, or they don't have a choice? They can decline the offer. They don't typically ask an Astartes if they want to join the Death Watch. They typically talk to the chapter master, and the chapter master will decide on who goes to the Death Watch. The Death Watch doesn't really make a request to any individual Space Marine, and in fact, it would depend on the chapter if the Space Marine in question would deny them or not if they were asked. And some Space Marine chapters view sending a Space Marine to the Death Watch as, a great honor, and others view it as, a pained necessity. And Michael Hawkins is right. It is a faux pas to say no. It wouldn't be great for it wouldn't be, politic for a chapter master to say no to a member of their chapter being sent to the Death Watch. So, sleep is for the heretic. Yes, Iron Kiko. Burb is definitely here. This is great. And we are going to get back into the stealth mission Infiltrated. I love how I can click a button and just boom. Yes. All right. Marines can also request to join it. It just really doesn't happen. That's true. I think one of the longest, there's a couple of really long-standing members of the Death Watch from different chapters, and there's a couple of really famous Marines that did serve as members of the Death Watch. Do Space Marines pay taxes? No. Alright, so, X's in the chat if you're ready for the second half of Stealth Mission Infiltration. Yeah, we're back to where we left off. And, funny enough, as someone said, I'm going to look up their name real quick. Bloop, bloop, bloop. As Julian said, right when the power station blew in the story, my power died. Aquila says, the sacrifice of the Omnis Eye have paid off. The stream looks great. There's so much stuff I want to do. I just have to get around to doing it. Oh my god. Refurbish X's all around. Here we go.
A full combat load and our entire limited supply of explosives, of course. Twitch had insisted that he wasn't going up in any Upspire death trap without a way to get down. This is why he'd be bringing his grav chute. Tink had chimed in, assuring the rest of us that the chutes were much less bulky now that he'd removed the extra bits, like all the safety features and backups.
We're gonna catch up to where we were.
The two of them had been pretty smug when, after verifying there weren't any less insane options, Doc and Nubby had proposed just jumping out the window as a possible escape route. Of course, that decision had been based on the theory that we'd be alone. But Tink said he was almost positive the chutes could take a little extra weight.
No.
Snitch wasn't conscious enough to object, but the cleric and interrogator were not very happy about being carried down the first 5-story drop.
No.
And there was the stupidest argument about bringing the damn cybernetic murder dog. Complaints aside, though, everyone got down to the adjacent roof just fine. Even Doc, who had to do it on only one grav coil on account of the stub round lodged in his left one. From that landing, it was just a short run to the next jump with decent cover the whole way. Not that any of the cartel security forces seemed interested in taking shots at us. They were a little bit preoccupied with fleeing the bank, as well as several other nearby buildings that must have been hooked up to that power station too.
Lovely.
Even the secret police flyers were taking off, possibly because the bank seemed to be listing slightly to the left now.
That's always a bad sign.
2 more drops got us to where we could see the alley that we'd parked the vans in. It was Nubby who got to the edge first. The little trooper peeked over, and after a pause asked Tink whether our vehicle had been hooked up to that power grid thingy. Tink said no, and Nubby suggested it must be on fire for a completely unrelated reason then. We all ran over to verify that yes, our untrusty steed was on fire. Everyone simultaneously looked at Twitch, who muttered something about anti-theft measures. After a few seconds of pondering this and the fire below, Doc raised the question of who in their right mind would try to steal such a shitty van.
The traffic
and then
cop
trailed off. There was an ugly, congealing silence broken only by our teammates asking what was going on.
The traffic cop had been
an
towed.
Increasingly loud thumping from the flaming van. We watched in horror as the van's rear door broke open with a bang, and a tall figure stepped out of the flames.
Oh my god.
Burning scraps of duct tape dropping off blackened armor like thematically appropriate snowflakes.
It's the raid boss!
Twitch informed everyone present that he'd told us so. We wanted to just shoot the guy. We really wanted to. If Amy had been there to guarantee us a kill shot, we might have gone for it. As it stood, though, it was just too much of a stupid risk to be worth it. It wasn't that we were in hostile territory, cut off from our superior and half of our teammates, and watching our escape vehicle burn to the ground in front of us.
Yes.
Or at least not just that. As the traffic officer stepped out of the van, he waved a badge we hadn't seen before in the air. Several specks circling in the smoke above the subspire descended and resolved into an entire platoon of jet bike riding Arbites, who, despite the fact that he was wearing a traffic cop's uniform, began following the man's bellowing orders to lock down the entire street.
We went to stage 2 of the boss fight. He summoned minions.
At the back of the alley, the scan van started to pull out.
He summoned
only
minions.
To stop and return to its spot as 2 jet bikes blocked the exit. After a few seconds, the tech priest got out, shot a glare in our direction, and disappeared through a small maintenance hatch before the Arbites could start rounding up pedestrians. Escaping from the subspire proved to be more embarrassing than anything else. The initial debate over what to do had involved a lot of totally unjustified criticisms from the interrogator and cleric, and possibly a few harmless threats of roof throwing from some of us. But before things escalated, Snitch woke up and announced Face was calling him. The Psyker and Assassin turned up in their little flyers, and while they didn't have nearly enough room to fit us all, at least they got our teammates out of our hair.
Thank you, Slacker. Slacker asked, do you think that Sigismund, if he was around, could have led the Death Watch? Also, as much as he memes Sigismund, he legit earned every honor that was bestowed upon him. He's just ridiculous, even in universe. If Sigismund had still been around, he could have been in the Death Watch, but he was already a chapter master at that point. He was legit one of the first chapter masters. So, could someone on his level lead the Death Watch? Probably. It would really depend, but the Inquisition leads the Death Watch more than anything really else than that. So that's a thing. The Death Watch is more underneath the Inquisition's thumb than really themselves. They are... He would have been an extremely good member of the Death Watch, but at the same time, he would have never been in it. Not unless he was born about 7,000 years later. Thank you, Slacker.
The flyers also had long-range comms, which put us back in contact with Sysitat, who was very busy with other things, and wanted us to hold position for 6 to 14 hours. Sarge told him and the rest of the team where to shove it,
is the Inquisition,
and announced our intention to get out on foot. The Inquisitor had objected, of course, as had his toadies, insisting that there was no way we'd get past any of the security checkpoints. Sarge's suggestion that we join up with the tech priest hadn't worked, since the cogboy wasn't in comm contact, and we were told that any attempt to grav shoot off the subspire would get us shot down by cartel security flyers. There was a bit more arguing, and then Doc raised the question of how the other team had extracted. A short run back into the burning and now obviously tilting bank, and a bit of grav shooting down that big stairwell later, we caught sight of a familiar pink mohawk, and Sarge nearly got his head shot off as he tried to land in the middle of a trio of incredibly twitchy Inquisition agents. Of the group, the only one we'd seen before was the Ganger, though we recognized the voice of a grizzled older man in power armor as the one who'd yelled at her. The third agent was a long coat and wide-brimmed hat-wearing man with some sort of fringe-world accent.
Lovely.
who seemed to be the least offended by our impressive collection of smells. They gave us some very dubious looks when we asked about catching a ride, and the ganger made a few pointed comments about people who shot other people in the ass expecting favors.
So Diclonius is correct. Sigismund might have prevented the Death Watch from existing. And the War of the Beast, I never really liked that. I did not like that series. It was just not fun. Mr. Reck asks, has the Death Watch ever operated as unified force, as the Death Watch equivalent of Chapter Strength? Not really. The most Death Watch I've ever seen deployed to one single location was when they went to the war for when they went to the war for Armageddon, and I only think a few Death Watch kill teams were sent out there. They just operate completely differently than any other Astartes force. So that's something to consider with them. They leave the chapter structure behind when they join the Death Watch.
Sarge, who'd entirely run out of fucks to give, told her to shut up and look on the bright side, since he'd been originally aiming for her head before Syssitat decided he wanted a prisoner.
Yeah.
This won a laugh from the Fringe Worlder and caught the attention of the Armored Man, who demanded to know if Syssitat was really commanding the operation in person. Sarge tried to go poker-faced, but relented when Nubby cheerfully informed them that Inquisitor Asshat was setting up an orbit on his comfy spaceship. As Tink and Twitch chimed in with their own opinions of our commanding officer and teammates, Sarge saluted the ghost of operational security. Doc assured him it was probably for the best. We spent most of the uneventful hike out through the maintenance tunnels, talking with our new friends. Sadly, the old armored guy, who turned out to be yet another interrogator, wasn't that talkative. And the limping ganger mostly just swore and glared at us, even after grudgingly accepting some drugs from Doc. The Fringe Worlder, on the other hand, seemed happy to tell us as much as his boss would let him. And the following 2 hours, he painted us quite a picture. Admittedly, it was conveyed in a nigh incomprehensible drawling accent, interspersed with far too many quaint sayings about his grandpappy's old groks. But it was still more than we'd gotten from our own team.
I feel targeted.
The gist of it was that everything was a complete clusterfuck. Basically, when the conspiracy had made their move on Oak, they'd stolen several eldritch artifacts from one of his little facilities. The artifacts had been taken to the conspiracy's base here on Harlock's Wager, which we knew about because one of Oak's allies had followed their ship. Unfortunately, instead of waiting for backup like a sane person, the Inquisitor had gone in guns blazing.
Yeah, why would you wait?
This was our problem now.
Of course.
To the guy's credit, though, it was why the planet's third moon had a shiny new metal-rich asteroid built around it, instead of a top-secret orbital facility, and only one traitorous Inquisitor in the system, instead of 4.
Huh.
Unfortunately, that last traitorous Inquisitor had proved to be a bit of a problem. According to the Fringe Worlder, she was just a junior member of the conspiracy, who'd actually arrived in system after the attack had already started.
I know who this is.
She turned out to be a powerful sorceress with a pet demon host.
Oh.
Which she'd sicked on the Inquisitor's vessel while he was busy. The end result was our guy being trapped on a hostile planet, desperately trying to hide the artifacts and get word out before he was torn apart by an enraged demon host. He was only moderately successful.
Yeah.
Where the Fringe Worlder and his teammates came into this was about a week later. When one of these messages reached their Inquisitor, counting ours, this made him the 7th one involved in this mess. Now, according to our narrator, his Inquisitor wasn't actually one of Oak's allies. In fact, he apparently held a pretty deep grudge against the man and everyone associated with him on account of how one of Oak's little training missions had stumbled into the middle of a decade-long investigation of his and blown the entire thing out of the water. We checked, it wasn't us.
Lovely.
Despite not liking Oak and not
I think it's Nubby's girlfriend.
The conspiracy before either, whatever had been in that message had been enough to get this Fringe Worlder's boss on board. So this new Inquisitor and his team had touched down about a week ahead of us to find this first guy dead, and the Sorceress tearing the entire hive world apart in a desperate search for the artifacts. From there, it had been a sort of competitive scavenger hunt.
Yay!
With the Fringe Worlders team having the advantage of a big dead drop full of clues and directions, while the Sorceress had the aid of the entire planetary government. Well, partial aid. It had been our now-dead conspiracy bosses who'd had the planet under their thumbs, and a lot of that power had died with them. The Sorceress was apparently some sort of master manipulator, though, and she was steadily regaining control. In any case, the team had...
Okay, so let me say why I think it's Nubby's girlfriend. And if you're wondering why this screen keeps on flickering up here, it's when I change windows. Anytime I change the primary window that's up front, that screen flickers. So that's what happens there. The reason I think it's his girlfriend is because we don't know who she was. We know that she was handed off, but we don't know if anything's happened past that point. We know that she was considered an interrogator. We know all of this stuff. But we don't know if she has... We know that she was taken into custody and not killed. But we don't know who she was given to custody of. Fun times. Can't be not enough demonids? Very true.
Had snagged one artifact with no problems, had been beat to another by the Sorceress, and had been in the process of claiming the third artifact from the cartel when everything hit the fan. Interestingly, nobody present, aside from the ganger, held us to blame for the deal with the cartel going south. They'd already been prepping, in case that notoriously mercenary institution turned on them, hence their sabotage team in the basement and all the heavy weapons they'd brought to the bank. But the handoff had actually been going smoothly right up to the point where the Sorceress had landed on the roof. A short chat between her and the cartel's planetary executive officer later, security was trying very unsuccessfully to kill them. At this point, we had to supply some of our own details.
Thank you, Slacker. I really do appreciate it, bud. Slacker says, the Death Watch uses squad-based operations using with as three... Basically, exactly correct. 3 to 10 Marines in a squad. That's called the kill team. If Astartes are special forces to the Guard, then the Death Watch is special forces to the Astartes. If they are deployed at chapter strength, then shit has truly hit the fan and exterminons is simply not enough. Case in point. Line up, Guardsmen. Okay. We got the squats coming, everything else like that. It is on the way. Prepare to deploy, Guardsmen. But yes, the Death Watch is typically deployed in small, specialized teams. And they don't, like... What would be a good... I'll say this. The Death Watch, if deployed in a typical Codex-compliant fashion, would be on par with the destructive capabilities of any force in the Imperium. In fact, they would probably supersede them by a huge measure. Get on the train. Just get on the train and stop complaining. You're just going down the street to a death world. You're going to pick up some Kriegers. You're going to have a good time. Anyhow, it would take... Mr. Reich, it would actually take something more pronounced than in Tyranid Invasion of Segmentum Solar. It would take something worse than that to get them to pull all those together. But if they deployed all together, it would literally be... We're talking Legion of the Damned type combat capabilities. We're talking old Legionis Astartes First Company style devastation that they could unleash. Just pure and outright brutality. And And it's because one of the things that Death Watch excels at is getting the Space Marines to literally work together and use all their styles in a single cohesive unit. And it's absolutely brutal. And yes, no one, because of the nature of the Death Watch, they are better as a small scalpel than a hammer, but if they were deployed properly in chapter strength, oh my god, what a hammer. There would be so much that could be that the Death Watch could do if deployed at large, even company-based Space Marine strength. It would be absurd, just because of how strong they are as a unit. In any case, thank you, Slacker. I really do appreciate it, bud. Here we go. Alec, I'm not gonna shoot you for not getting on the train. I'm not that kind of commissar. I'm not. I'll just use flamethrowers. Yes.
Explaining that our team had actually been trying to beat them to the prize, and all the confusion with us misidentifying them.
That Clonius,
the Fringe World
fire
had
the ponies!
reciprocated with the story of how their Inquisitor had nearly run into face in our assassin while all of them tried, and failed, to kill the sorceress before she escaped in the PEO's armored flyer. The rest we all pretty much knew. Everyone started working together. Syssitat was tasked with grabbing the artifact, but had to destroy it instead for some reason. And both teams were able to make a mostly clean escape thanks to the spontaneous explosion of the power station under the bank. Nobody'd even died. Most of the other team, including the tech priest and sister we'd shot up, had extracted via a disguised flyer, while
Nice.
the three walking with us had...
Thank you, Aquila. Aquila says, but you already have the normal chapters to be the hammer, so the Death Watch is being used as the inquisitorial support, so they have better firepower. This is true. This is true. But the Astartes are considered, like... The Astartes are considered the hammer. The Imperial Guards considered the anvil. And if you really want to go into that like level of comparison, the Death Watch would be considered an auger tool to just do fine etching. Thank you, Aquila.
pulled out on foot after getting cut off from the LZ. So really, when you looked at things objectively, it had been a pretty successful mission. Sure, a few people had gotten shot, 3 times in the cleric's case.
Yeah.
The Arbites might have impounded our vehicles, and we'd heard some very building collapsey sounds somewhere above us on our walk. Oh, and we'd destroyed the artifact instead of stealing it, but that had been Syssitat's idea, not ours.
He'll blame them for it anyway.
Still, though, not a complete failure, right? For some reason, we didn't feel like the Inquisitors would agree with us. Actually, one of the 2 Inquisitors proved to be surprisingly reasonable about the whole thing. It just wasn't ours.
Lovely.
We met the second team's Inquisitor when we finally climbed out of the maintenance tunnels a good 2 kilometers away from the cartel's subspire. We exited into a disreputable-looking garage, which was populated by a bunch of biker types who could have easily been the ganger's siblings, as well as a tired-looking truck driver in his vehicle.
Okay.
While our companions paid off the bikers, the truck driver took in our filth-encrusted appearances and announced that we'd be riding in back. This led to a bit of difficulty when the truck's cargo area turned out to be half full of the exact sort of boxes and metal drums that orcs hide in to ambush unsuspecting guardsmen.
Oh, that's going to work well.
According to Twitch, that is. This in itself wasn't a problem. We were perfectly willing to check the boxes for commandos/loot before boarding. The issue was the way that the driver assured us his cargo was orc-free before any of us mentioned them. Twitch noticed this and reacted about as well as you'd expect. Fortunately, the Inquisitor, as he was introduced to us after things had calmed down, had just as good a reaction time as Twitch, and enough telekinetic skill to jerk 3 successive weapons out of the Demolitions Trooper's grip. Even more fortunately, he proved to be a good sport about the whole thing. He even gave Twitch back his guns and let us inspect the truck's contents. No orcs, but nothing worth pocketing either, sadly. Before personally driving us back to our base. We didn't get to see the meeting between the two Inquisitors. In fact, we weren't even allowed into the base. Our teammates at the door, the interrogator especially, acted like it had been our idea to spend half a day tromping around in the sewers and refused to let us in until we'd visited the shallow pool of chemical-laden water the locals referred to as a lake. At least all the acid meant we didn't need to bother with soap.
There you go.
Scrubbing. Tink recommended that we clean our weapons and more delicate equipment somewhere else.
Right.
Anyway, by the
Finally,
time
I
we
agree
were
with Tink on
finally
something.
readmitted to our own damn base, the other team and their Inquisitor had left, leaving us without any handy distractions when Syssitat had us step into the secure conference room for our debriefing.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, it didn't go as bad as we'd expected, partially because Syssitat was too distracted with something else to properly chew us out.
Right.
But mostly because Snitch wasn't there to rat us out as we creatively shifted blame onto various other parties, mostly the other team and the tech priest. Still though, there was a lot of yelling about insubordination, stupidity, arbitrace, and sharing intel with the other team. He seemed especially peeved at us for bringing that other Inquisitor into our secret base, which was a little unfair since we hadn't said a word about it. I mean, he was a psyker. What were we supposed to do?
Right.
Shoot him before he read our minds? We did point out that Twitch had actually tried to do that, but that only got us yelled at more. Eventually, though, Syssitat got tired of yelling at us and getting monosyllabic responses, and ordered us back to our quarters, where we were to just stay out of the way and try not to unsuccessfully kidnap any more interplanetarily famous arbitrates. The days that followed were filled with tireless inquisitorial investigation, as both our team and the other worked to decode the location of the next artifact before the sorceress. At least we were pretty sure that's what everyone was doing. Our involvement primarily consisted of watching the base while everyone else was out and playing poker in our quarters when they weren't. This suited us fine. We were busy enough between dealing with unpleasant side effects of the Unitorum-grade antibiotics Doc forced on us, and taking as many showers as possible. Despite our non-involvement, we did pick up a few scraps of information. For instance, we found out that the scan van was somehow recovered from Arbitrate's custody after only a day, as, to our disbelief and dismay, was our shitty van. How it survived was a mystery. Twitch was especially up in arms, insisting that his anti-theft device should have burned out every scrap of electronics and left the engine beyond repair. Despite that, though, it rolled into our garage as barely functional as ever, with only scorch marks and half-melted pair of seats to testify to its immolation. We weren't sure whether to blame the tech priest or Syssitat for this, so we just settled for hating them both.
There you go.
On the note of the vans, Sarge was called into a short briefing on the subject of the traffic officer, where he learned that the man had been reinstated as some variety of judge in the Jack Hive Arbitrace.
Really?
There was a bunch of political stuff involved, too. Something about the Arbitrace being pissed at the planetary government. The important part was the officer was now leading an investigation into what had happened at the cartel's subspire.
Lovely.
This was technically good news, since a big investigation would cause more problems for our enemies than us, but was counteracted by the description of 5 rogue PDF stormtroopers that had been given to every Arbitray and cop in the Hive.
Lovely.
Our orders to stay inside were reiterated. By the end of the week, Doc had gotten all of us, including those of our teammates who'd gotten themselves shot, back into fighting shape. The one exception to this was Snitch, who'd developed some sort of irrational nausea around Doc, and kept spewing everywhere until the medic gave up and let someone else try treating the psyker's minor injuries and infections. Tink, meanwhile, had repaired Doc's grav chute despite the medic's protests against ever using the damn thing again. He also made a few more attempts to fine-tune his uncooperative plasma weapon, but got yelled at when he tried to test it inside the base. Twitch and Nubby, through a dedicated campaign of whining, dark comments about what Twitch might build himself, and threats to go to the other team, managed to convince Sysitat to refill our limited supply of explosives. Nubby then went to the other...
Refurbish wins the chat! You cannot kill Truck-kun! Truck-kun is eternal!
Other team
this
anyway,
is
but
true.
only managed to score a handful of nades off the ganger before her boss yelled at her for trafficking on Inquisition time and stopped bringing her to our base for meetings. Sarge just kept an eye on the rest of us and enforced that not leaving the base rule until the next artifact was found. Our first clue that progress had been made was our entire team returning in the middle of the night and rushing into the communications room. The second was when the other Inquisitor showed up at our HAB unit's front door with half his posse and informed Sarge that he would level the entire HAB block if we tried to get the artifact without him.
Thank you, Slacker. Slacker says, I forgot, but did you enjoy the Sigismund book? What did you think about the fact that he was picked up by the Night Lords? I have not been able to read the Sigismund book yet. It is one that I am, like... Okay, so, here's what I have so far. I am waiting for the end of the month because that's when the next installment of Siege of Terror goes through. After that, there are some books I want to pick up, namely Garo. I want to check out that book. I want to check out the Templar book with Sigismund. I want to check out a few more of the Primarch's books, in particular Ferrus Manus, because he and I both have the countenance of a brick. And there's a lot of books that I want to get around to actually reading. And I want to check out, like, Sigismund is up there for me. It's in the top 3. But there's 2 others that I want to get through first, and that would be, of course, the next Siege of Terra book. And have you guys seen the artwork for that? It's literally Sanguinius at the Eternity Gate. So, like, I know that there's only supposed to be 7 books in that series, and we're on book 6. So we're finally going to find out what happened between Horus and the Emperor, and what happened with Sanguinius, and see if a lot of the fan rumors are correct. But if Sigismund had been picked up by the Night Lords, then, like, if Sigismund had joined the Night Lords instead of the Imperial Fists, then flat out, that would have been... Oh my god. Can you imagine Sevatar and Sigismund in the same legion? He might have been able to help something. But chances are he would not have been able to help much because Sigismund had the count. Sigismund was a really good leader. He was an exceptional an unparalleled swordsman. But at the same time, he couldn't get his daddy to stop being mad at him, so I doubt he could get through the Conrad curse. Thank you, Slacker.
Sarge, not being paid enough to deal with this sort of inquisitorial power politics bullshit, just showed them all into the comms room, ignoring the massive amount of stink-eye directed towards him by our teammates for doing this. Sarge invited the rest of us in to help keep an eye on the dangerous people we'd just let into the base.
Yay.
Really, though, it was just so we'd all be there to protest if they tried to send us into the sewers again. Sysitat's usual self-praise-filled briefing style was hampered somewhat by the presence of the other Inquisitor, who had a tendency to make pointed sarcastic remarks about who'd actually done what work. We decided we liked the man, psyker or not. Anyway, skipping over all the barbed comments, unasked for critiques, and other such low-level conversational sniping, the briefing started with a picture of a rune-covered box with a skull for a latch. Whether this was the artifact itself, or if it was actually inside the box, was not explained to us. Sysitat claimed the box had been given to a small local courier service by the now-dead Inquisitor, but instead of being quietly hidden away like he'd ordered, it had wound up in the hands of the biggest Underhive crime lord in neighboring Queen Hive.
Lovely.
The artifact falling into the hands of the local underworld wasn't really that unexpected. In fact, the dead Inquisitor had mentioned the possibility in his notes. The odd part was what the crime lord had decided to do with it. Instead of immediately fencing the artifact or hoarding it away until the heat died down, this guy decided the best thing to do with this evil spooky box thing was to use it as the grand prize for some sort of high-stakes Eldritch artifact poker tournament.
What?
Seriously. Needless to say, everyone was a bit dubious. Even Sysitat, who was the one presenting the evidence, kept pausing to reread his notes and rhetorically ask, why? This wasn't even some megalomaniacal rogue traitor or spoiled planetary noble. By all accounts, the crime lord was a shrewd, level-headed, hard-working businessman with only a minor tendency towards throwing rivals into vats of boiling toxic waste.
Only a minor tendency.
Sense, and the other team's Inquisitor kept insisting that it must be some sort of trap. But eventually, he became resigned to the fact that he lived in a universe where common sense no longer existed. We welcomed him to the club. The other Inquisitor, perhaps still feeling a bit unhinged from his change in worldview, announced that our only option was to enter the poker tournament ourselves. Surprisingly, Face immediately seconded this, volunteering to be the one to enter. And even more surprisingly, so did the assassin, who proposed using the one artifact the second team had recovered themselves as our ante.
Wow.
The idea began picking up speed at an alarming rate, with several of our theoretically sane teammates, as well as Tink and Nubby, excitedly offering suggestions. The rest of us had enough experience with bad ideas to recognize a truly terrible one in the making,
yes,
and watched with growing unease. Doc made some futile attempts to politely interject some sanity into the conversation, while Twitch just muttered to himself about psychers making everyone suicidal, and tightened his lead foil-lined helmet. Sarge was steeling himself for a more yelly attempt than Doc's, but was beaten to it as Sysitat blew his hologram up to maximum size and volume, and loudly demanded to know whether everyone had lost their minds. We deeply appreciated the ensuing lecture on why we would not be entering a high-profile poker tournament guaranteed to be attended by our enemies.
Right.
Or risk the single artifact in our possession in said tournament.
Oh, come on.
Or count on some sort of card-reading X-ray eye patch to guarantee us victory.
Right.
Admittedly, we could have done without him using us as a reference point for the relative stupidity of an idea. But whatever. As Sysitat wound down, everyone looked a bit sheepish, especially the other team's Inquisitor, who kept shaking his head and quietly asking himself what he'd been thinking. They all perked back up before long, though, and by the end of the briefing had hacked out a far simpler 27-stage plan to sneak in and steal the evil box thing while the tournament was in progress. Thankfully, our part of the plan was going to be nice, simple, and almost certainly sewage-free.
It's going to have all three. Thank you, Slacker. How splintered would the word bearers be if Lorgar was killed at Terra by the Khan or Sanguinius? Also, would Lorgar be able to win such fights? No. Lorgar is the... Okay, so here's the thing. And I say this, and understand, all you Alpha Legion fans, I say this just because he is the smallest of all of them. Lorgar is a worse fighter than either Alfarius or Omegon, and Alfarius and Omegon would be at the bottom of the list. Lorgar was incapable of beating literally anyone. Lorgar would get slapped around like nobody. Like Sanguinius would spider kick him away, and just it would be unbelievably one-sided if he fought Sanguinius. If he fought the Khan, it would be even more ridiculously one-sided. Not because I view the Khan as a better fighter than Sanguinius, but because Sanguinius is Sanguinius is a much better duelist. The Khan's style versus what Lorgar could do is completely different. Lorgar was not awakened to his psycho potential at that time. And Ronnie is correct. Lorgar couldn't want to fight with a breeze, much less Sanguinius or the Khan. Now, the reason I say it about Alfarius and Omegon is because Alfarius and Omegon are the smallest physically of the Primarchs. He and like he could hold against Dorn. He could hold against a whole bunch of other people, but at the end of the day, Dorn killed Alfarius with style points, and it wasn't desperation or anything like that. Dorn killed Alfarius with style points, and I kind of looked at that. I need to put out my tier list of duelists because Lorgar is flat out on the bottom. I think Sigismund could kill Lorgar. I think Sigismund and Karn could have killed Lorgar. Lorgar, it's just so bad. Like, the depth of disrespect I have for him, it was just terrible. So, yeah, Super Saiyan Colonies, no one beats the Khan. Even when he loses, he wins. Ask Mortarian. What are we org down to judge strength based on size? No, that's not what I'm basing it off of. There's size does have a factor. Size does have a factor, and if you put straight up, if you put them, Sevatar could have. I think Sevatar would have. In actual duelist, Dark Innovator says the top people are like the Lion, Lehman, and the Khan. I disagree with Lehman. I disagree in totality with Lehman. I think the top three in this particular, in terms of duelists, would be Sanguinius, the Lion, and Conrad Curse. And the reason I'm saying the Sanguinius and the Sanguinius, of course, flat out, he's probably the best duelist out of all of them. But at the same time, he was looking at Conrad Curse, wondering if he could take him. And Sanguinius honestly didn't know if he could take on Conrad Curse. Now, the reason I made the comment about Alfarius is because, simply put, there's so many, because most of the Primarchs are insanely tall. And with that comes reach, with that comes everything. If you put Alfarius in his element, he becomes one of the most dangerous Primarchs, period. It's kind of like if leaving size out of it, refurbished tech priest, leaving size out of it, Lord just wasn't a fighter. He was a preacher, a speaker, but not a fighter. That's because he never really tried to be a warrior. But if you took Alfarius and put him in his element, he could beat the brakes off of someone. The problem was, he went at Dorn and tried to fight Dorn straight up. And Dorn is an absolute like mess when it comes to fighting. He could easily beat the brakes off of half the Primarchs. And he did beat the brakes off Alfarius, even though I really do like him. No one says no soul size matters. Real size doesn't matter as much. If you're a Primarch, if not, good luck bayonet charging a Titan. Okay, how do I explain this in a manner which will convey what I'm talking about? Okay, so if you're looking at a straight up fight, there's a lot of things like reach. There's a lot of things like weapons, things like that. That's the reason the reason most of the other Primarchs used, traditional weapons in terms of swords, hammers, things like that. Alfarius used a spear to try to make up for that lack of reach. And the thing about it is, when you start looking at that, once if Alfarius can't hit, okay, I really need to just make a duelist video. I need to make a duelist video. And let's remember that Dorn wrecked Fulgrim. Yes, Dorn just absolutely brutalized Fulgrim. But at the same time, Fulgrim at that point, Fulgrim, out of the Demon Primarchs, Fulgrim was the one that downgraded in terms of martial ability. Just absolutely downgraded. Aquila, thank you. Perturabo, Lorgar, and Alfarius were seriously misused by the Emperor. Each would have been absolutely supreme in their element, field engineering, uplifting, diplomacy, and espionage, but all had problems as generals. True. Very true. But Lorgar was damaged goods at the start. Lorgar was absolutely damaged goods at the start. And I think one thing I think you need to understand is Alfarius was being used far before he was actually found. It's a fan theory that Alfarius never left Terra. It was a fan theory that he never once left Terra. And the Alpha Legion was in operation on Terra the entire time. There's a lot of stuff to support this as well. But at the same time, it's all conjecture. There is a list of how good certain Primarchs would be in a fight. I know who I'd expect to win. I know who I would see, winning half the fights out there, flat out. The Lion would be definitely top 3. Conrad Curse would be top 3, and Sanguinius is definitely the winner in my regard. Leman Russ, I hate to tell you, Wolf guys, Leman Russ got pasted by just about everyone he fought, and I mean everyone. He lost to Angron. Even though he did some philosophical, try to do some philosophical. Oh look, my troops have you lined up. You would have lost the war, but you would have beaten me, but you would have lost the war. That Angron didn't care about that, and you should have known that. He had the brakes. Him and his legion had the brakes stomped out of it by the Alpha Legion because they sat there and tried to play the Alpha Legion's game and they just got brutalized by him. And Lorgar would have lost to Magnus if the half of the damn Space Wolves Legion wasn't trying to attack Magnus at the same time the two were fighting. Leman Russ is better at group combat rather than one-on-one. Leman Russ, oh god, I'm gonna make enemies in this chat. Man, Evil Baka Cat says, fuck Russ. He talks big game and gets his ass beaten every time, and always has to have his men bail him out. Yeah, I see that. The only thing about the Wolves, as far as that goes, is they're extremely loyal, and they're going to bring a lot of support equipment. They're going to bring a ton of support equipment. But they lost every major engagement. They got taken to task by a force that was a sixth their size, if not lower than that in terms of just pure numbers. They got beaten soundly by the Alpha Legion, and they had a whole bunch of other problems. Okay, yes, if he would stop bringing up wolf stuff, it would be good. Okay, Jesus. Everyone is hating on Lehman. I love it. Russ is the worst loyalist Primarch. Failed to rein in Angron. He wasn't even supposed to go and rein in Angron. He did that by himself. He was deceived by Horus into killing Magnus and had Horus on his knees and didn't take the shot. All true. All true. Didn't Horus lose to Horus even though... Have you no wolves? Yeah. Alright, let's get back into this because we're going off on a tangent. We haven't gone off onto a tangent. We've been in a tangent for a while. Here we go.
While two teams of highly trained inquisitorial agents infiltrated the spire-top fortress mansion of a slightly megalomaniacal crime lord, we were assigned the arduous task of making sure nobody stole our vans. It was a tricky job that entailed a lot of very difficult napping, card playing, smoking, and fast food eating. But someone had to do it. The Crime Lord's mansion was on its own little spire, only a few hundred meters above the Queen Hive's smog clouds, and had only two major entrances. One was a big gaudy landing pad flanked by disguised anti-air batteries, where a steady stream of incredibly rich people were landing their flying vehicles and making their way into the mansion's main level. The other was a small utilitarian retractable causeway on the far side of the mansion, for servicing vehicles and all those non-rich people who were regretfully necessary for keeping things running.
Poor people!
Guess which one we got to stake out. While the scan van positioned itself to have a good view of the landing pad, our shitty van and a pair of far better quality unmarked getaway vehicles were parked in the large parking garage that served as a sort of waiting area for the causeway. As it turned out, our guarding of the vans was actually pretty necessary, since apparently the Crime Lord's normal business had all been put on hold until his insane poker tournament was over. We found ourselves rubbing elbows with a wide variety of terminally bored people, ranging from underhive gangers to mid-hive businessmen, to a bunch of off-planet mercs with a very unhappy-looking man tied up in the back of their vehicle.
Oh, lovely!
Between our unmarked but obviously guard-issue gear, and our own palpable aura of slightly paranoid boredom, we fit right in as we settled down to wait for our teammates to get on with the mission. For lack of anything better to do, and because we'd been ordered to, we kept an eye on the vehicles going over the causeway. Not that anybody actually expected anything important to come in that way. The Inquisitors had intel that the sorceress would be attending the tournament, and had distributed some pictures of her to us. But she'd obviously be landing up at the pad with all the rich people.
Oh, okay.
The most anyone expected were some sort of
So it's not going to be Nubby's girlfriend, sadly enough. I got my hopes up.
Enforcements if the Crime Lord discovered our infiltration. Or possibly a few APCs of secret police if the sorceress decided to take a more direct approach. Both of which would be dead obvious. Since Twitch tended to watch hard enough for a dozen people, he was put in charge of this, while the rest of us kicked up our feet and made the best of our first excursion outside the base in over a week. Over the course of about 3 hours of idling, Twitch managed to spot a dozen suspicious catering vehicles. Sarge punched out a ganger who seemed too interested in one of the getaway cars. Tink and Doc learned never to buy a genuine meat product, sausage in a bun, from a street vendor, and Nubby got told that while spitting over the edge at passing vehicles was almost acceptable, hucking beer bottles at them definitely wasn't. Deprived of his entertainment, our self-appointed quartermaster wandered off for a while, and met various guys who he proceeded to get to know. He returned a bit later to tell the rest of us that he was a little short. Once we were done laughing, Nubby clarified that he'd worked out a dubious chain of deals with the assorted scum around us, but hadn't quite bought enough merchandise to get the deal he wanted. He asked Sarge if, hypothetically, our teammates needed all those fancy little bells and whistles their vehicles had, and ours didn't, more than we needed, say, a crack missile launcher. Sarge decided it was time to take a break from guarding the getaway cars. This proved to be an incredibly good decision. Nubby, with Doc enlisted as stuff carrier, was returning with his loot when word came from the scan van that the sorceress was landing. Everyone but Twitch huddled around Tink as he pulled out his data slate and opened a video feed we were pretty sure he wasn't supposed to have access to. We watched as a small but incredibly fancy-looking flyer, which had last been seen flying away from the cartel's spire, landed on the pad and a woman who perfectly matched our picture of the sorceress got out. Things became slightly confusing as a second identical woman exited, followed by a tuxedo-wearing man who both women draped themselves on. The trio joined the crowd of planetary nobles, rich criminals, and wannabe rogue traders, or whoever else attends an evil artifact poker tournament. The team's general channel exploded into chatter about which was the real sorceress. The vid feed began to lurch sickeningly as the servo skull broadcasting it was maneuvered in for a closer look, and Sysitat decided that now was the right time to treat everyone to a lecture on the efficaciousness of the classic body double trick, what it said about the sorceress's mental state, and the counter-strategies he himself had developed over his years as an expert observer. Back behind us, Twitch announced to no one in particular that he saw another suspicious and potentially orc-filled vehicle. Doc interrupted our Inquisitor's lecture to ask whether the tux-wearing man, who was generally being left out as the vid panned between the two potential sorceresses, was the demon host we've heard about, and whether something warpy might be going on. Sysitat instructed us to stay quiet and stick to our duties, and then asked Snitch pretty much the exact same question. As the psyker spewed a bunch of jargon about astral signatures or whatever, Twitch informed us that things were getting really, really suspicious now.
Please tell me that this is Bane. Because if I can't have Nubby's girlfriend, let me get Bane.
And asked where Nubby had put that crack launcher. Twitch, switching from his usual paranoid muttering to a more active problem-solving mode, was enough to get our attention. Sarge pulled himself away from the vid feed to see what had him riled up while Doc quietly prepped a trank. The two of them arrived to see the bridge below suddenly empty of all vehicles, aside from what looked to be a sort of armored luxury vehicle. The courtyard at the far end of the bridge was similarly devoid of all the caterers and servants that had been there earlier. Instead, there were nearly 3 times as many of the eclectically armed goons that served as security for the crime lord's manor. The reason for the increased security became apparent as a portly, overdressed, but still somehow menacing man came out of the manor. Sarge swore under his breath and was about to interrupt our teammates and inform them that the crime lord was meeting someone at the back entrance, when the armored limo stopped just inside the courtyard's big gate. Sarge, Doc, and Twitch all froze as yet another strikingly beautiful woman climbed out of the vehicle, and a creeping feeling of dread washed over all 3 of them. The woman who exited the armored limo looked almost nothing like the pictures of the sorceress we'd been given, but the almost supernatural grace and poise with which she greeted the crime lord were gnawingly familiar. As a faint musical laugh drifted up from the courtyard, Twitch suddenly tensed and started rocking back and forth while swearing under his breath, before darting away towards the van. Doc and Sarge shared a look of dawning horror as they finally recognized the inquisitorial traitor and apparent conspiracy member formerly known as Interrogator Angelica Dominicus.
Yes!
Or as Twitch called her, the bitch.
The bitch is here!
The face, hairstyle, and the rest were all different than we'd remembered, especially inasmuch as they were actually moving instead of medically paralyzed. But there was absolutely no doubt it was her. Honestly, we probably still would have recognized those mannerisms, posture, and voice, even if it was coming from a man, or demon, orc, or dreadnought for that matter.
Wait, I gotta... Hold on a second. Hold on, because now I gotta do something. Because I have to do it. I have to do it. I absolutely have to do it. 1 second. Wait. Yes, let's go.
Practically been burned into our brains during the months she'd been our interrogator. The real question wasn't who she was, but rather how in the Emperor's name she'd gotten here.
Yes.
Given that the last time we'd seen her, some of Oak's most humorless minions were taking her off for a little chat about why she'd been orchestrating giant, chaotic blood rituals instead of purging gene stealers. We filed that question away with several others we intended to ask Oak if we ever managed to get our hands on the scheming bastard. Of course, once we accepted the fact that our ex-interrogator was here, flirting with the crime lord below us, as opposed to dead.
No, I gotta play that. Hold on. Oh. Hold on, wait 1 second. Okay, hold on. Like, seriously? No one hit the nail perfectly on the head. This is how the players feel about the DM right now.
You can't keep getting away with it!
At least rotting in size-shielded sensory deprivation tank.
Mm-hmm.
The next few logical leaps were easy. She was obviously part of the conspiracy, and just as obviously was the Inquisitor killing, government suborning, demon host summoning sorceress fighting us for the artifacts, regardless of any and all evidence to the contrary. It was just how the universe worked, at least according to Twitch, whose worldview seemed increasingly credible with every passing mission. Anyway, while Twitch ran around freaking out, Sergeant Doc tried to explain the situation and its ramifications to a curious Tink who'd never met our ex-interrogator. This meant, rather disastrously, that nobody had much attention to spare for Nubby. Before anyone could think to stop him, the idiotic little trooper jumped onto the barricade, waving his arms and joyfully greeting his jelly baby, shouting that it was him, Nubby, and that he knew they'd let her out of prison someday. Down in the courtyard, the sorceress's head whipped around, and while we were too distant to actually see her expression curdle as she recognized Nubby's sawed-off form,
damn it, Nubby!
Chazelle felt it.
Why, Nubby? Why? Damn it, Nubby! Oh God, why do they let him keep doing things like this? Why? Thank you, Slacker. The bitch is back and she brought the Psyker. Quick, get the DDT. Let Twitch make a list of explosives and let him loose. Get the Black Templar! Airlock Nubby now! Just X in the chat to airlock Nubby. We don't even have to airlock him. Just shoot him. Jesus. Thank you, Slacker.
Sarge lunged for the little idiot and yanked him off his perch a fraction of a second before a bolt of warp lightning passed through the space where his head had been.
Oh, Jesus.
Our cover being very definitely blown, Doc and Tink immediately returned fire, but with only limited success.
Oh my God.
The medic's lasbolts merely plinked off a sort of psychic shield, while Tink, who still wasn't quite sure what exactly was going on, but knew when to shut up and shoot, missed her entirely, and loudly blamed the sights of his gun. The clusially converted Astartes plasma weapon, which the rest of us were beginning to expect had a bit more of a machine spirit than your average lasgun, responded by venting a jet of superheated gas in the general direction of Tink's face. The bright side of all this was that instead of carefully aiming for a headshot, the sorceress just settled for firing her next lightning bolt into the concrete barrier. This was not our best moment. 4 of us were on the ground, ears ringing and covered with small shrapnel wounds. Nubby was yelling at everyone to stop shooting before we accidentally hit his girlfriend. Doc and Sarge were trying to get back up and do just that. And Tink was hurling yet more abuse at his plasma weapon while trying to hold it as far from his face as possible. Down across the bridge, in a show of comically misguided gallantry, the crime lord pushed the sorceress behind himself and instructed his goons to open fire. Simultaneously, the doors on his armored limo slammed open to reveal a team of far better armed and armored men and women.
Lovely.
And the big anti-vehicle defenses above the courtyard gate began tracking our position.
Ripoff Productions LLC says, remember, the author is Nubby's player. Oh my God.
Then Twitch fired the crack launcher.
Why? Oh, why is Nubby Nubby? Why is Nubby the way that he is? It doesn't make any sense. Somebody just needs to get just do something. Help out the poor lad. Thank you, Ripoff. Oh God, I cannot believe he did that.
Sure, he'd ran and got.
Of course, I should have seen it coming.
Around. As much as Twitch wanted to drop the crack directly onto the sorceress, it was just too small a target over too large a distance for a dumbfire missile. Which was why, as he popped up at the next barricade over, Twitch muttered a prayer to the Emperor and fate in general, and took aim at the armored limo. Specifically at the recently opened door and the large pile of ammunition and safe-cracking explosives sitting in the rear seat inside.
Lovely!
The sorceress's retinue had about a second to try and dive for cover before an explosion a good order of magnitude larger than even the most powerful crack missile reduced them to the consistency of chunky salsa.
Nice.
The sorceress, being a good deal farther away, psychically shielded and with the bulk of the crime lord between her and the epicenter, was merely tossed across the courtyard like a gore-splattered ragdoll.
Ha!
For a brief moment, Twitch thought he could even hear the terrified and enraged screaming as she bounced off the far wall, but it turned out to just be Sysitat. The Inquisitor was angry with us, to say the least, but we weren't in the mood to indulge him in one of his little tantrums. We no longer cared about his silly artifact mission. We had a new objective, and we were going to carry it out with a bloody vengeance. Sarge's report was terse. It had to be, given that he was taking potshots at the fleeing sorceress between each sentence. He told Sysitat who we'd seen and who we'd killed, as well as what we suspected and what we intended to do about it. He cut off the Inquisitor's protests with a simple request that the man either do something useful or stick to his own business. He and his minions could keep doing whatever it was they had planned. We were going to kill that steaming, manipulative little bimbo once and for all. The mood of the moment was slightly spoiled by Nubby's complaints that it wasn't her fault and we should just capture her instead.
Shut
Sarge
up,
said
Nubby!
he'd take it under consideration. The problem with our self-appointed kill mission was that the target was currently on the far side of a long, coverless bridge, and a few dozen hostile, heavily armed men. Fortunately enough, said heavily armed men weren't reacting in anything approaching a coordinated fashion. At the time, we put it down to a mixture of poor training and a fiery death of their boss, but we were later informed that it undoubtedly had more to do with a large-scale attack on their comm network, flooding them with contradictory orders.
Lovely!
Apparently, Sysitat had taken Sarge's advice about doing something useful for a change to heart. In any case, the goons in the courtyard were wildly spraying fire across the...
This is the first time that Sarge has yelled, I think, at the Inquisitor and told him to shut the fuck up. And I think every once in a while, you yell at somebody and tell them to shut the fuck up, it actually works.
Entire garage, and while most of the people inside it were keeping their heads down, a significant portion had started shooting back. The cherry on top, though, was the sudden arrival of what seemed like half a battalion of secret police, complete with air support. Complete and utter chaos doesn't even begin to cover it. After a few more unsuccessful attempts to snipe the fleeing sorceress, Sarge announced it was time to pursue, while everyone was busy shooting at each other. His initial order to put on our grav chutes and jump across the gap to the manor was rejected by the rest of the team, on the grounds that slowly falling through a massive crossfire, like so much living skeet, was a terrible idea. The subsequent plan to drive across the bridge in our teammates' souped-up getaway cars was much better, but met with a minor snag when it turned out a little more than just their hubcaps and radios were missing. Nubby shrugged and said he'd been intending to get some cheaper replacement wheels later. The rest of us just glared at him as we climbed into the only other vehicle available.
The van.
Secret police and gangers alike stopped shooting to stare as a shitty, burned-out van barreled through the garage, skidding around the down ramps at several times the posted speed limit. Inside, Tink was alternating between swearing and screaming as he attempted to maintain speed through the melee, while the rest of us bounced around the seatless interior like ping-pong balls and tried not to step on any loose explosives. We made it nearly the whole way down without taking more than the odd stray bullet.
Slacker, thank you. If Surge wanted to, he could have killed the Inquisitor the first day. With which they could have killed all of them at any time they wanted. This is very true, but Sarge is trying to be the best that he can be, and he's having to deal with this utter insanity. I feel so bad for him, but at the same time, oh my God, it's the first time he's actually stepped up and like started yelling back at the Inquisitor. Like, the Inquisitor actually heard somebody more angry than him for the first time, and it's good that he did. Thank you, Slacker.
At the second-to-last level, Tink abruptly found himself staring down the barrel of a matte black Chimera's multi-las turret.
Lovely!
The techie screamed as he slammed the vehicle straight from third to reverse and backed up the ramp just barely ahead of a stream of high-caliber las fire.
Wow.
Tink spun the van back around
as
it reached the top of the ramp. While in the back, Tink, Nubby, and Doc all yelled at each other about how best to tackle the approaching Chimera. Sarge told all three of them to shut up, pointed at a large hole in one of the garage's walls, opening roughly where the bridge was, and told Tink to gun it. As the edge of the hole approached, Tink realized two things. Firstly, that a 2-story drop looks a lot bigger when you're about to drive over it.
Right.
And secondly, that the bridge we were aiming for had begun to retract.
Lovely.
Given that he knew how bad the van's brakes were, the techie did the only thing he could think of, and screamed at everyone to turn their grav chutes on. In what would have been a sweet-ass action shot if it weren't for the quality of the vehicle involved, the shitty van shot out of the side of the garage at its rather paltry maximum speed. The ungainly vehicle sailed through the air in a noticeably shallower than normal arc, barely clearing the widening gap between the garage and the retracting bridge, and coming down on top of a pair of stunned goons.
Lovely!
Between more or less attempting to lift a van from the inside and the subsequent landing, it was a minor miracle that nobody broke anything. Well, not any bones, at least. The grav chutes sure as hell weren't going to be seeing any more use, though. We disentangled ourselves from their remains and grabbed it for our weapons, as Tink weaved through the crossfire towards the wrecked courtyard gate and the burning remains of the armored limo. This approach was finally enough to focus some hostile attention on us, which we reciprocated. As we burst through the flaming wreckage into the courtyard, wildly firing out in every direction, and screaming at the top of our lungs, Twitch paused to ask himself if we were the real orcs all along. This philosophical quandary was interrupted by Doc, who'd spotted the sorceress sprinting for the big main doors at the far end of the courtyard. Everyone who could manage a shot out the front window, except Nubby, laid fire on her, but despite the heels and dress, she made damn good time, and if the few solid shots we'd landed weren't enough to break down her shield before she'd made it through, and slammed the heavy doors behind us. We weren't going to let a little thing like that stop us, though. In fact, we weren't even going to let it slow us down.
Ronnie, the Sysitat is a full-fledged Inquisitor. He was promoted. Sarge is still just an interrogator.
On their own, the poorly aimed shots Sarge got off with Tink's unreliable plasma gun wouldn't have been enough, but fortunately that wasn't our only heavy weapon.
Yes, Twitch is now self-aware.
At the time we'd been entering our van, the discovery of 2 more crack launchers and the revelation that Nubby had hawked the getaway car's wheels for an extra one earned the little trooper yet more ire. But we all quickly came around to his and Twitch's way of thinking.
Oh,
the second
God.
of our 3 anti-armor missiles blew a sizable hole in the doors, which Tink subsequently widened. The horrified expression of the sorceress's face as the shitty van burst through the doors and barreled down through the hallway towards her was something to treasure. Shocked goons and housekeeping staff dove for cover as Tink tried to, and failed, to keep control on the manor's carpeted floor. The shitty van spun to a halt well short of its intended target, but that didn't stop Sarge from taking a few potshots out the driver's window at the stunned sorceress before she fled down the side hall. Tink swore at the non-com as one of the shots nearly took his nose off and slammed the van into reverse, throwing Sarge against the dash and the rest of us back to the floor we'd just climbed off. There was a series of thumps.
It's Nubby and the gang in the misery machine.
And an unpleasantly wet crunching noise as Tink reversed without checking his non-existent mirrors, got us turned back around, and took off towards the hallway the sorceress had taken. On a highway, you might have called the van's pace sedated. What inside was another matter. Tink tore down the halls, scattering people and decorative fixtures alike as we gained on our quarry. Twice we nearly missed her as she dodged down side halls, and Tink nearly spun us out again on another carpeted section. But before long, we had her square in our sights, at the end of the manor's narrowest hallway yet. Sarge, Doc, and Twitch all opened fire as Tink floored it. In retrospect, we probably should have gone in on foot right then, because that hallway didn't turn out to be quite as wide as we'd thought. Well, actually it was.
I need a soundboard.
It's just that we hadn't taken all the furniture and such into account. It started with a couch getting stuck on the bumper instead of going under the tires. Then came a bust pedestal. The bust itself nearly took off Sarge's head as it sailed through our missing windshield. And a housekeeping trolley. Before we were even halfway to the sorceress, a veritable wave of furniture, knickknacks, carpets, and one unfortunate goon had risen up in front of us, blocking our view and forcing us to a grinding halt. Given the impossibility of opening any of the doors, Sergeant Doc just pushed a hole through the debris, covering the windshield, and the rest of us climbed down after them.
Actually, Master Context, that's something that I knew because I already knew that because, like when it all started coming out, they were doing interviews and stuff like that. I can't remember where, but I've known that for years, bud. Thank you, though.
The sorceress didn't stick around to watch this, of course, but fortunately a pair of terrified maids were able to point us in her direction. As we ditched the van, hopefully for good this time, and double-timed it down the hallway, we noticed a significant increase in the chatter on our comm beads. From the sound of it, everything had hit the collective fan. Our teammates up at the big party upstairs were caught in some sort of firefight. A few of the others were yelling about chasing someone, and the other team had abandoned stealth in favor of racing to the vault.
Right.
Interestingly, according to the map Tink got from them, the sorceress was heading that way as well.
Oh, lovely.
And we were closer to it than almost everyone else thanks to the fact that we'd driven halfway through the manor instead of walking like chumps. Sarge was about to point this out and offer to lend a hand, after we'd killed the sorceress, of course, but was interrupted as we rounded a corner and more or less ran face first into an entire goon squad. The 6 eclectically armed men were even more surprised than us. You could tell because we fired first. Now, we'd all been bitterly complaining about the quality of our current weapons, but against soft targets like, say, a bunch of idiots running into battle with no more armor than a cheap suit and a fedora, a lasgun does just fine. At that range, we didn't even
40s
need to
monsters,
aim.
let's go.
Hell, we didn't even stop. All 5 of us just held down the triggers and kept running.
Lovely.
The only reason one of the poor dumb bastards survived long enough to try and return fire was because the bulk of his comrades blocked our initial spray. Twitch and Nubby jogged backwards for a second and sorted that out while the rest of us fired at the blonde, red dress-wearing blur diving across the hall ahead of us. By that point, we were well and tired of the sorceress's little psychic tricks. The bubble was the big annoyance, of course, but she'd also tossed a few more of those lightning blasts over her shoulder as she ran, and we were pretty sure that her ability to move at a full sprint despite wearing a dress and high heels was some sort of warp trickery as well. Her dive across the hallway proved that last theory. Not only was she moving at a speed one typically associates with aircraft, she also managed to shoot Sarge twice with an auto pistol while doing it. Unfortunately for her, Sarge was wearing a bit more armor than the goons had, and supernatural speed doesn't necessarily enable one to dive through 3 guardsmen's worth of fire. The sorceress let out a little shriek of pain as one of Doc's shots finally penetrated her shield and clipped her leg, She only barely managed to stay on target and make it through the door. And there was a rather satisfying crashing sound from the far side of it.
Nice!
She still managed to shut it before any of us got to it, though. Unlike most of the other doors in the manor, this one was fairly heavy and had an electric lock. Tink's attempts to open it, first with his increasingly unreliable plasma weapon, and then with his data slate, failed miserably.
Okay.
Doc's idea
Come
to
on.
calm the tech priests to see if he could open it remotely only got him a bunch of incoherent binary screeches before he was hung up on. So Twitch was about to use one of our limited supply of breaching charges when Nubby turned up with a blood-soaked ID card along with a few other options. It turned out there wasn't actually a palm or retinal reader, but we did applaud the effort. We emerged into the stairwell on the far side of the door. We'd been hoping it'd just be a closet or something, but oh well.
No.
To find things a bit more lively than we'd expected.
Yeah?
The sorceress had made it a good 4 levels above us and was trying to keep a low profile. The dozen or so goons engaged in a pitched firefight a few levels above her, not so much. Judging by the familiar weapon sounds and the comm chatter, the guys on the far side of the gunfight were the Second Inquisitor's team. We decided they probably had things under control and kept our heads down as we sprinted upstairs after the sorceress. Whether due to the leg injury or finally running out of psychic steam, we steadily gained on the sorceress, but she still managed to exit the stairwell, 1 level below the gunfight, before we could line up a shot worth taking.
Thank you, Jarrett. Jarrett asked, why do I feel like Nubby is going to mess this up somehow? It's because he already has. He already has, massively. And he's going to do it again. Because Nubby's going to do what Nubby's going to do. And we just need to get him a prostitute and get this out of his system. Just do it. The universe will be better off. Thank you, Jarrett.
Fortunately, the ID card we'd acquired opened this door as well.
Yay!
And we piled out into a poshly decorated hallway, only a handful of seconds behind her.
Oh!
The first thing Sarge, who was on point, saw as he came through the door was another door directly opposite him. Said door was labeled security and contained several goons hastily grabbing heavy weapons and body armor. Before any of them could register what was going on, 3 grenades had sailed into the room, the door had been slammed shut, and a bust-bearing plinth had been braced against it. That little problem nipped in the bud, Sarge, Twitch, and Tink turned their attention down the hall to the right, where the sorceress was sprinting towards an ornate pair of doors and screaming at the 2 men guarding it to help her. They did, of bloody course, which was a pretty terminally stupid decision on their part. Sarge, Twitch, and Tink all grabbed cover in the little art-filled alcoves lining the hallway and poured fire at the sorceress and the 2 door guards, who appeared to be a better-dressed and augmentically upgraded variety of goon.
I know,
While the
Ronnie,
one on the
it's
left
ridiculous.
hosed the hall with a heavy stubber. The other keyed open the big doors, which the sorceress almost managed to reach before her shield gave out with a sharp popping sound, and she tumbled to the floor. For a second, it looked like we'd finally done it, but our brief moment of victory was spoiled as soon as the right goon grabbed the traitorous bitch around the waist and carried her the last few steps towards the doors.
Huh.
His buddy, still trying to lay down suppressive fire, very abruptly found himself alone, out of cover, and sole focus of 3 very annoyed guardsmen's attention.
Yeah.
At the rear, where Nubby had been left with Doc for obvious reasons, the 2 of them tossed their own pair of grenades into the unsuspecting goon squad on the level above them before joining the rest of us in the hall as the door guard finally went down. The fancy doors behind him proved to be more decorative than functional, so it was only a few seconds before we were through them and into what appeared to be some sort of art museum.
Oh, yay.
And not a small one either.
Oh, no.
At Sarge's signal, everyone split up and began searching for signs of our target, but we only got about a dozen steps before a deep, metallic grinding sound drew our attention to the far end of the room. All of us, including Nubby, despite Sarge's orders to the contrary, sprinted through the maze of displays and velvet ropes towards what turned out to be a large, slowly opening vault. We arrived just in time to watch as, with a little triumphant smile in our direction, The sorceress shot the man that had just opened the vault for her in the head and slipped through the door as it slammed back shut and alarms began to blare. We weren't actually too concerned about the alarms. Security seemed to be a little preoccupied currently.
Just a
The
little.
half-dozen las turrets that descended from the ceiling as the vault went into lockdown were another matter. Everyone grabbed cover behind the biggest, most expensive exhibits available and stuck to them as the turrets started scanning back and forth.
Oh, lovely.
The question of just how good these turrets were was answered by Tink, who poked his nose out to try and line up a shot, while the one closest to him was turned away, and very nearly got his head blown off as it spun to face him far faster than he could draw a bead.
Huh.
After a few seconds of pondering the situation himself, Sarge asked if anyone had any clever ideas for getting us unpinned. Tink had a few, but they all seemed to require either his drone or other plasma weapon. Sarge told him to cram a sock in it. Nubby's suggestion that we smoke the entire room and hope we were better at spotting the turrets than they were at spotting us was rejected when the trooper refused to actually test it himself. Twitch's idea to just chuck explosives everywhere and hope the turrets all failed before the ceiling did was, as usual, made Plan B, and Sarge regretfully went with Doc's suggestion. Our fearless leader took a deep breath, put on his most professional-sounding voice, and calmed Sysitat for help. The Inquisitor was incredulous, to say the least, but after a few probing questions, some cogitator checks of his own, and a slightly sarcastic description of our current location from Sarge, he acknowledged that not only had we cornered the sorceress, we'd done it in the exact vault where the artifact was located.
Lovely.
He had far less trouble believing that we'd gotten ourselves pinned down by a bunch of turrets. At Sysitat's instruction, we sat on our hands for a tense few minutes, until we abruptly received word from the tech priest that the las turrets were temporarily offline, and we had 10 seconds to get to the control panel next to the vault to permanently disable them. Sergeant Doc immediately sprang up and had just enough time to get fully out of cover before the turrets around them opened fire. Doc was saved by Twitch, who realized that something was off.
Thank you, Abhuman. Abhuman the Scrug says 20-year Space Wolves player here. And I'll just blank Lehman Russ, beep, his hypocrisy, beep, his blank tier sword skills, beep, his ego, blank his year-long blank haircut, and blank you two for making me send this 6 times. Jesus! 6 times? Yeah, Abhuman, if you're not familiar with my Mistakes of the Emperor, Lehman Russ is actually the topic of conversation for the next Mistakes of the Emperor. And there's a really good reason behind that. Remember to misspell your curse words. Everybody can't spell 4th grade words when it comes to typing stuff out in YouTube. Here we go.
And yanked the medic into his own
Thank you, Abhuman. I really do appreciate it.
cover as he began to run past. Sarge was less lucky. Tink was equally distrustful of the tech priest, but wasn't in position to offer much other than a bit of ineffective suppressive fire as the non-com scrambled to find new cover. Bleeding fairly badly from arm, leg, and side wounds, and trying to make himself as small as possible behind a marble statue, a good deal thinner and more shapely than he was, Sarge cursed into his comm bead and pointed out that the turrets definitely weren't down. An annoyed-sounding Sysitat said to give him a few minutes, and informed us all that if we couldn't follow orders and sit still for 5 minutes, we deserved to get shot. After a few seconds of sputtering rage, Sarge pointed out what the tech priest had said. The Inquisitor told him to stop making up excuses and accept that he'd made a mistake like an adult.
Oh my god.
None of us could actually hear the bastard tech priest snickering as Sysitat berated Sarge for trying to shift blame onto his teammates, but we all knew he was and silently agreed that this meant war.
Yeah, he just tried to get him
By the time
killed.
the las turrets had finally been deactivated for real, and we'd very carefully tested the fact, using the time-honored helmet-on-a-stick technique, Sarge had collected 3 more minor las wounds. Doc immediately went to work treating the non-com as well as his own arm wound, while the rest of us debated what to do about the trapped sorceress. Sycitat's instructions were to hold position and wait for the real inquisitorial agents to show up and deal with her, but we weren't quite sure our combeads had transmitted those orders correctly. From the sound of it, those real agents were having one hell of a time getting to our position, and we were feeling a bit uneasy about how smug our old boss had looked as she locked herself in that vault. Tink poked around the vault's brain-splattered controls a bit and was able to find a vid feed of the interior, but it was only showing static.
Oh, yeah.
Twitch examined the vault's exterior, even leaning out the windows to check the one flush with the manor's outer wall. He discovered no hidden doors and a lot of squiggly sigil things that
I agree with Alex. Shove
probably
nothing.
there to foil anyone trying to get in or out using magic. Reassured that the sorceress was probably still inside, he and Tink unilaterally decided to start melting a jetpack-sized hole in the door. When Nubby asked, they told him it was an air hole. The hole was just over halfway through, and Sarge was ambulatory, if not happy, when time very abruptly ran out. We weren't the best informed of what had been happening before then.
Oh,
We'd been
really?
listening to what comm chatter we could overhear, and Sycitat had said something about the rest of the team needing his guidance with a more important problem as he'd signed off. But that was just general stuff. The first real clue we got that something had gone badly wrong was when someone started frantically screaming "Demon Host" over the general channel. We weren't in any position to watch what went down. All we knew was that the situation on the level above us went to shit in a matter of seconds.
It typically
From
does
what we
that.
could gather, the Inquisitor and his entire team had finally reached a position only a level above us and the vault. They'd been preparing to come join us via a short rappel in and out the exterior windows, and then the screaming started. After that, there had been a lot of gunfire, explosions, and what felt like some serious warpy stuff.
Yes, serious warpy stuff.
We weren't exactly sure what was going on up there, only that it involved the sorceress's pet demon host, and that it really wasn't going well for our allies. After nearly a minute of this, Doc raised the question of whether we should go help them. Not that any of us wanted to get anywhere near a demon host, but if we had to, it'd be better to do it with the guys upstairs, as opposed to after the thing had finished killing and eating them.
Yeah?
Sarge agreed and was checking with Twitch whether we could blast up to them instead of going all the way back to the stairs, when someone upstairs yelled something about their Inquisitor. There was a blast of screaming warp energy and faint sense of distant, terrible heat, followed by a more mundane explosion that collapsed a section of ceiling just next to where Twitch had been about to place his charges. Before any of us could try climbing up this new hole, there was a shout of "Stop him!" A shattering sound, and something black and flappy dropped past the windows next to us.
Okay.
The falling object turned out to be a man in a big black coat, as opposed to some sort of demonic bird monster. We still shot at it though, just out of reflex, but failed to score any hits and quickly gave up, in favor of watching whoever it was fall a few hundred stories to their death.
Huh.
That wasn't what happened though. Instead, the small figure below us spread his coat out like some sort of parachute, which seemed to do a lot more to slow his fall than the laws of physics dictated.
He's Batman.
As we watched, the man glided outwards,
Batman!
barely missing the widening spire below us, and swooping through the 2 lanes of air traffic crossing it below us. Any question of whether the thing below was the demon host vanished as he pulled out an obnoxiously supernatural series of acrobatics, striking glancing blows off flyers, doing a one-handed pirouette around a protruding Vox antenna, and briefly dangling off a passing servo skull. Even more impressive, given our own inexperience with hive traffic, was the way that the flyers he didn't purposely hit went out of their way to avoid him.
Okay.
Whether it was telepathy, the sheltering hand of a dark god, or pure bloody luck, the man, if you could call him that, left a path of confusion and destruction behind him as flyers swerved out of his way, sometimes right into oncoming traffic or the hive around them. It was an impressive and terrifying display, but on the bright side, every second it continued to put him farther away from us. We all breathed a sigh of relief
Bane Jones as a demon host.
As with a last little mid-air flap, he vanished into the permanent smog layer below. Most of us had turned away towards more pressing tasks when a panicked, choking sound from Twitch called our attention back to the window. We watched in disbelieving horror as a flyer suddenly rode up out of the clouds with a small black-coated figure standing proudly on its roof.
Really?
Our opinion on the matter was summed up for us as someone upstairs screamed, "Bullshit," and opened fire. All of us started shooting at the demon host carrying flyer as well. Not that we stood any chance of accomplishing anything at that range, but what else were we supposed to do? Well, actually, we probably should have backed the hell up and stayed out of sight. But it took us a few seconds to figure out that the vehicle which the demon host was oh so nonchalantly riding wasn't actually a flyer. No, the correct term was gunship, or to be more precise,
good God.
a Vendetta variant Valkyrie airborne assault carrier. The
Why?
realization that we were looking more or less directly down the barrels of 6 las cannons hit us just in time, and we scrambled back just barely ahead of a series of blasts that more or less atomized everything within 3 meters of the windows we'd been standing at. Stalwart guardsmen that we were, we didn't let a little thing like being massively outgunned deter us. While we might have been a bit more on the prudent side than certain superiors of ours liked, we knew the demon host's goal was to free the sorceress, and the only way we were going to allow that to happen was over our dead bodies. Or at least over the other teams.
Okay.
Sarge shouted a hold fire order up the hole in the ceiling. Doc calmed Sissitat to ask if any of our teammates were going to show up but didn't get an answer, and the rest of us spread out into ambush positions. The plan, if you could call it that, was a simple one. Shoot the gunship down as it stopped to level out with us. Ideally, before the demon host had time to jump off it. By all reasonable logic, it should have worked.
Mm-hmm.
The gunship, its demonic passenger no longer perched on the roof, leveled out directly in front of us, and 3 lasguns, an oversized plasma pistol, and a crack launcher all fired simultaneously. Not a single shot hit its target. It was horrifying, almost like we'd all simultaneously been replaced with a bunch of raw PDF recruits.
It is him.
Both Sarge and Doc's guns sprayed sparks out their power packs in the lasgun equivalent of a catastrophic weapons jam. Nubby still fired, but stitched a line of shots across the room, hitting both Twitch and Tink in the process.
Ooh.
As half a kilo of powdered masonry was blown into his eyes, Tink, who was more ready for a weapons failure than the rest of us, immediately dropped his overheating plasma weapon, only to then fall directly onto it as Nubby's shot hit him in the leg.
Oh, God.
As bad as all that was, what happened to Twitch was even worse. Despite taking a hit in the side, he fired our last single-shot crack launcher directly on target. The missile was halfway between the windows and the gunship when, I shit you not, a pigeon that had been nesting on the building's exterior flapped directly into its path. The impact fuse, which shouldn't have activated on such a soft target, did. All of us, even Tink, boggled as Twitch's missile went off in a blast of flames, concussive force, and charred feathers, a good 5 meters short of its maximum effective radius, and then dove for cover as the gunship returned fire.
It's Bane Johns. It's gotta be.
None of us were killed by the salvo of laser cannon shots. But that was only because the gunship turned out not to have actually been aiming for us. As the vault's perforated outer wall fell outwards with a scream of tearing metal, the gunship spun around to reveal its open troop bay, where the suddenly horribly familiar figure of the demon host stood waiting.
Yeah.
We watched in dawning horror, as with a psychically propelled jump, the sorceress leapt across the gap to the gunship's troop compartment,
Oh,
and
God.
into the waiting arms of fellow ex-interrogator and self-styled interplanetary man of mystery, Bane Johns. Words failed us. You've been listening to another tale from Cloak and Dagger Narrations. If you enjoyed what you just heard, please consider flinging money wildly in the general direction of my Patreon.
Oh, he has a Patreon. Okay, now. So, I'll be putting that in the description down below. Oh my god. Phalius, you missed everything. Have you seen this before? Oh my god. Phalius, you missed the whole thing, buddy. Oh god. Oh, you guys were calling it, and I was sitting there thinking, okay, it's just a demon host, but when they started having all those failures, oh my god, it is so bad. Aquila says, "Gentlemen, it is time to kiss our asses goodbye." Yes. Shit has hit the fan at hypersonic velocity. Bane Johns is the enemy, and it's bad because he is an actual threat. That is very true. Oh, God, this was an excellent episode. This was an absolutely excellent episode. Inquisitor Asshat is about to have the worst day of his life. That's an understatement. Because now he's going to figure out why this group of guardsmen is the way that it is. Because they've had to deal with these kinds of enemies. And they've had to do whatever they can do. It's not a demon host. It's worse. The interplanetary man of mystery is here. On the plus side, their plan will be epic. I can't wait. I can't wait. We need a blank. We definitely do. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick 2-minute and then I'll be back to wrap up everything. Yeah, I'll be back in a few seconds. This was outstanding. This was a lot of fun. Let me see. What do I do here? Hold on a sec. You know what? What incompetent dumbasses have put those two together in the same cell without an untouchable? Who knows? Tink has the Lamenter's luck. He's almost died 10 times this whole mission. What headphones am I using? These are just old headphones that I've had for 5 years. I'll be back in a second. Oh my god. going to say hello. We're going to say hello. Okay, we are here to say hello now. Yes. Thank you, Dark. To contrast the previous mistakes of the Emperor, old man, to contest the previous mistakes of the Emperor, I don't think lack of empathy is a mistake so much as character trait. Yeah, that's what I've been saying as far as his character traits. That is the case. But the high expectation of what his Primarch should be, very much so. Now this, if you guys remember, this is little Arco. This is little Arcona. And she's very tired. This is Poke Species. Yes. Little one. Little one, look at the chat. Yes. Look at the chat. They are talking. Yes. It looks like she's looking at the chat. Oh. Where would one go? Where would one find a blank in a hive? Or do we need to Nubby to get more Wraithbone? Finding a blank is hard to do outside of pretty much any circle. So it's something that they'd have to basically requisition for in most cases. Yeah, she's the pupper. We have the pupper here. Oh wait, let me see. Hold on. Thank you, Dark. I really do appreciate it. But yeah, the Emperor made so many problems with what he expected and how he carried out things. Okay, let me turn down this light. So there we go. Boom. Oh, she is most likely going to be going out west. Yes, you're going to go out west. You want to nibble my nose? Yes. You going to nibble my nose? Yes. Okay, go ahead. She's probably going out west because she is going to be a service dog. We're thinking. We got in contact with somebody today. Well, not today. Yesterday, and she's probably going to be going out west to be a service dog. So, it's good. Yeah, they're like, she is going to be, we're probably going to be holding on to her for a little bit longer, getting a little bit of training done, and then we're going to be sending her out there. And she's going to be a service/support animal. And she's going to be a very highly trained one. And we were asked, do you have this, a female, blah, 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 blah. And yes, she is going to be a pogu. She is going to be the pogu. Yes. I put her right here on my neck. So yes, even in cute, she still serves. And she is going to be, the good thing about her is, she is going to basically, the reason we picked her and not, the reason did you just sneeze? Oh. What would I think about that? It would enhance your viewing experience massively. What would I think about what? Let me scroll back up. Good fit. A good pair with a decent headphone amplifier. Actually, Burb, there's a lot of stuff that I want to. There's a lot of stuff that I'm wanting to do as far as upgrading my stuff. Like microphone, stuff like that. I'm getting to it as I can. The headphones are actually very, very good. It's a good set of headphones. They're just dated looking. They're just very, very dated looking. But yeah. Little. Oh, I hold her like this. I hold her like that. Yes. Oh, scratches. She's adorable. Oh. Okay. But Yeah, Burb, that's something I'm going to be upgrading to the same microphone that Baltimore has. I already have that saved. I'm ready to get it in the next couple of weeks. And then I'm also going to get some sound paneling on the walls. That's something else I'm going to do. And then I'm going to be doing this. Okay, hold on. Headphones and an amp. I think I just need to. I'm very very relaxed when it comes to things. But yeah, if you guys want to do something like that, talk to me about it, and we'll. Okay. There you go. Sorry, I'm distracted by little rage. Look, this is the best part. Look at her little foot. She's got a little white sock on her foot. It's lovely. Yes. And this, oh my God, you're. Oh. Look at her. I can't. I can't stay focused with this. I just can't. Yes, padded walls for the crazy. Actually, yeah, Baltimore is actually awesome. But there's a lot of I have a lot of things that I'm wanting to do as far as upgrading everything. What am I thinking about Stargate? I actually do like Stargate. I didn't watch the series, but I do love watching the original movie for that. I haven't read any of the books. I know just enough to pass by in conversation and say, yeah, that sounds like something I know a little bit about. But past that, I don't know that much. She is so much bigger than she was. Look at her. She's a fur worm. She's a little furry, angry thing. And she has a skunk. I don't know if you guys can see it, but she has a skunk stripe right here. But yeah, she is a mess. My thoughts are going everywhere. As far as okay, and she's starting to walk. She's starting to learn how to walk. She's starting to actually learn how to do that. This is how I want to take a nap. Little lump right here. Yes. What's going to be easier for the Guardsmen to get, a blank or a Wraithbone? A blank. Technically, a blank. It'd be a lot easier for them to get a blank than Wraithbone. Finding Wraithbone was a really, really strange situation. And it just happened to happen because of Nubby, of all people. Nubby and his black market contacts. Now, blanks, on the other hand, they'd have to requisition through the Inquisition. So, if they actually had an Inquisitor that didn't hate them, it'd be a lot easier to get. Yeah, blank, anything involving Eldar is just a headache and a half. Oh, yes. Do you know that Fabius Ball attached a still sentient arm onto the towel because it was funny seeing him push the towel? It's funny. What? Oh. Because the hell with the towel. That's hilarious. I want to know where that's from. Because I got to read that like today. Oh, man. All right. Obsidian Black says he needs to head off, cooking dinner for the whole family, pay a favor back to Mama, even though she's footing the bill on the groceries. What you making, bud? Oh, well, you know what? Tell me later. In fact, I'm going to get ready to close out this. What? What? They make little puppy noises so much. Dark Angels, Blood Angels Omnibus, Black Tide. Okay. We're going to go ahead and close down the stream. Thank you all for joining. Thank you everybody that did Super Chats. I really do appreciate it. All that really does help out. it helps out more than you guys could realize. One of these days, like this channel is doing a lot to change my life in a lot of positive ways. No, that was not the last episode. That was not the last episode. We still got a few more. She already does inflict incredible cuteness on me, Defies. She does. And she's puggy. She's a pugger. Okay. There she is. She is very, very tired. She's trying to find a place to nest and go to sleep. Here, turn on the light just enough to where... There we go. Now, you can see her coat. This is the good thing about her. She's got the dual coat of her father. This coat is like very, very thick. She's got a very, very thick coat. But she has the double coat. What? What? What's the matter? What's the matter? You're okay? She has the double coat of her father, and she seems like she's going to have the sturdier build as well, which is why we recommended her to be a service animal. Yes. Alright. I'll catch you guys next time. I don't know what I'm going to be doing later today. We'll find out. I do know that I finished the script for the next episode of Commissar Story, and then we will see what I can do today for 5-ish minute lore. Thank you guys for joining me. I'll catch you guys next time.